Everybody wants the latest, flattest screen and mega size. We don't want to pay to make them. Yes, we better globalize, 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 globalize.
We're not here today to oppose trade. International trade is very important to American workers and to the American economy. So we're here to oppose the way in which trade deals are being negotiated today. We're here to oppose the lack of transparency in the current process. We're here because we're concerned about the potential damage yet another bad free trade deal could have on U.S. jobs, on the environment, on our food safety, and on the very sovereignty of our democracy. So we're here because we care about U.S. jobs. We're here because we care about working families. We care about our environment. We care about food safety. We're concerned about climate change. And we care about our democracy. So we feel a moral obligation to address the damage affected that globalization has visited on the least among us as well. And so that's one of the reasons we're here. And so our mission today is a very simple one. We're asking our elected representative in Congress, Jim Himes, to vote no on fast track. We're asking him to not relinquish the congressional oversight and authority over trade policy to this or any future president. We're asking Congressman Himes to stand with his constituents and with the rest of the Connecticut congressional delegation and vote no on the fast track bill.
The last time in the history of this country that we had this much corporate power over our economic policy and our political process was actually when we weren't even a country yet. And that is when the East India Company, that was chartered by the Kingdom of Britain, got a very weak king of the Kingdom of Britain to issue a tax program in this country to enforce a monopoly on tea that was held by the East India Company. I bring this up because it did not end well for either the East India Company or the Kingdom of Britain when they did this. And this fast track bill that continues to give corporations more unprecedented power, not only of the treaty, of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Treaty, but also of our economic and political process, this fast track bill is really the same thing. It's a very, very interesting and very accurate parallel. Right now, our interests are not being represented in this trade negotiation. They are being represented by some 600 people, overwhelmingly dominated by American big business, instead of our elected officials in Congress who should be at the negotiating table, or even trade representatives who should be at the negotiating table. Our interests as Americans are not being represented in these negotiations. So, to Congressman Himes, who I think of as a decent and honorable man, on behalf of our 1.2 million members of Democracy for America, some 10,000 of whom are in Connecticut, many, including myself, who live in this district, I would urge the congressman to support and do the will of the people of the United States of America, not the United States of Morgan Stanley, not the United States of Goldman Sachs, not the United States of Exxon, or any other sovereign wealth fund of the 11 countries who we're negotiating with. I ask the congressman to represent this country and the overwhelming majority of Americans in this district to put a stop to this thing, to put a stop to this bill that gives the president unlimited power for 6 years to negotiate these kinds of agreements, and to put this negotiation back in the hands of the American people so that we can see what's in this agreement and we can have a voice in the end and the outcome of it for fair labor standards, for environmental standards, and for the overwhelmingly a majority of Americans, 90% who have not gotten a raise in the last 20 years. So Congressman Himes, please listen to your constituents, vote no on fast track, and let the American people be part of this decision process and not just a bunch of corporations who are not acting in the national interest. Thank you.
Doing trade right would be just fine. In fact, doing trade right would be an economic boon for us, for the country, for the workers. And when the economy is doing well, we're able to do all the stuff we want to do for the environment. One of our worst enemies is a really trashed economy. So doing trade right is just fine. What's before us is not doing trade right. It is the same mistake that we have made with trade pacts in the past, and for some reason we haven't learned from them. So there are two problems with what's going on here. One of them is the process, and the other is the standards. The process is that all of this is secret. The negotiations are secret. The drafts of the negotiated trade pacts are actually available to Congress, but only to the senator or congressman, not his staff. They can walk into a room alone to read them. They can't take notes. They can't take pictures. They can't get a copy of the draft of the trade pacts. This is all done in secret. If fast track passes, Congress would have very limited ability to do with the proposed track presented by the president. They'd have limited opportunity to debate it. They wouldn't be able to amend it at all. They would just have to push it through. This is not the democratic process at all. This is a secret process that does not work at all for our democracy. Finally, the second issue are the standards. If we're going to engage in a process which is going to give us a binding agreement with other countries, the first thing we need to do is to say, what are our standards? What do we need to make sure is it an agreement that's not negotiable? We need to commit to standards which are going to protect the environment, which are going to protect American jobs, which are going to protect our food quality, and so on. And we have to make a promise that these standards are going to be upheld in whatever gets negotiated, and they cannot be given away. We need to make sure the environmental standards are there, that what goes on in the rest of the world that damages the environment, species protection, illegal logging, and so on. Step one is to say these are important to us, and whatever trade pact comes out of this has to protect those things. We need a guarantee that these standards are going to be there, and we need a guarantee that the mechanism is in place to enforce those standards. I don't quote Ronald Reagan very often, but he used to say, trust but verify. We need to make sure that these standards are in place, and we can look and make sure they are being supported, not just paying lip service to them. Perhaps most importantly of all is the agreement called the Investor State Dispute Settlement Resolution. That's ISDS, not to confuse with some other initials. What this does is it says nations give the right to corporations for them to be sued in secret tribunals solely because the corporations are prohibited from making a profit. No standards, just the corporate right to make money. If the secret tribunal rules that a corporation is not allowed to make money because of some national standard like environmental standards, the corporations can collect damages from the country. And these tribunals are done in secret. There are no rules. It's not an open court system the way we're used to in the U.S. ISDS is an enormous threat to America and to the world for all kinds of reasons. It is not the way to do this. It's one of the most significant giveaways to the corporate world that I've ever seen in it. I'm going to say, for me personally, it's one of the worst parts of the proposed trade pacts. We definitely do not want to engage in a process like this. So what we need to do is enforce a standard which we're not very good at doing in the U.S. Priority number one is the public interest. And by public interest, I don't mean to say corporate profits. If what you're doing is not highly protective of the public interest, you're doing it wrong. Thanks for listening.
I'm here today on behalf of the 20,000 Connecticut Food and Water Watch members consumers and constituents who know that the Trans-Pacific Partnership will threaten the safety of our food. The TPP will unravel vital food safety rules that make this trade deal literally a kitchen table issue. Trade deals put business interests before the public interest, and the TPP cares more about imports than it does import safety. Food safety touches all of us. We all want to know that the food we're feeding our family is safe to eat, but the TPP will bring a flood of food imports and fish imports that will swamp U.S. safety inspectors. Take Vietnam and Malaysia as an example. We already import more than 500 million pounds of fish and seafood from these two TPP member countries. Our inspectors look at only 2 to 3% of these seafood imports, but they are rejected twice as frequently than fish from other countries, and for reasons like illegal drug and chemical residues and salmonella bacteria. This tainted seafood is farmed in overcrowded ponds of filthy water. To combat disease, the fish are fed a cocktail of drugs and dangerous chemicals that are banned in the United States. And the TPP will lead to more of these imports. Our border inspectors would be overwhelmed, meaning uninspected and unsafe fish could end up in the grocery store near you. The TPP could also attack our food safety laws and regulations, and food and agribusiness companies want the TPP to weaken both our border inspection and our government food safety laboratories, and these are our last line of defense against unsafe imported food. Other countries and foreign companies will be able to challenge and weaken or even eliminate U.S. food safety rules as illegal trade barriers. These giant companies want to use the trade deals to attack and eliminate our consumer protection laws. It's just that simple. And U.S. citizens want to know where their food is coming from. Recently, trade bureaucrats eliminated our country of origin labels that told us where our meat was being imported from in the United States. So we're already seeing trade agreements doing this, and the TPP is just going to make it worse, especially if Congressman Himes votes to fast track it, because without fast track, he will be able to make amendments to prevent these types of actions. And if the TPP is fast-tracked, even GMO labels are considered illegal trade barriers. And consumers have the right to know what they're eating. There's a national grassroots effort pushing for GMO labeling laws, and Connecticut's law grew out of efforts started by Congressman Himes' constituents. But this trade deal just throws the movement of labeling for GMOs under the TPP bus. To put it quite simply, that's just crazy. Our food safety and labeling laws are designed to keep our families protected from dangerous foods. They're not trade barriers to be broken down to benefit big food and agribusiness companies. The TPP will clearly, if fast-tracked, harm and threaten our families and our health. Congressman Himes has a chance to stand up for Connecticut families, for the many thousands of Food and Water Watch members that are his constituents and food shop in his district. Congressman Himes must stop the insanity and vote against fast-tracking the TPP. Thank you.
So hopefully everybody can see that the TPP touches on an incredible wide array of areas in our life. It's not really a trade deal. It's more of a corporate rights agreement than anything else. And so for us to give up congressional oversight to this and let the president push this through without adequate oversight is just insane.
So I work with the Carpenters Union. We have approximately 1,000 members here in Congressman Himes' district. I'm a longtime resident of the district. And this issue has really touched a nerve for me with the Carpenters. My first job out of college was working for then Congressman Schumer, who is now a senator. And at that time, Chuck Schumer was probably one of the most pro-free trade legislators in this area. And there were other Democrats as well who were pro-free trade. Since then, you'll notice that Senator Schumer was one of the ones who voted against the Fast Track Amendment recently in the Senate. And he basically changed his mind. He just said, hey, after all these agreements, what we've seen is that there have been no teeth and there is no compliance in these agreements that you make with the other countries. So while at the best case scenario, you can make the argument that these agreements are a mixed bag. There are some industries that benefit, some industries that lose based on countries. Supposedly pharmaceutical industry, for instance, is going to be a winner, in this trade agreement. The bottom line is the compliance is not there. Senator Warren has just come out with a study that I would recommend to everyone. If you get a chance, go on her website. Her staff basically took a look at compliance issues that have come up in all the previous agreements. And so I think that's why the president is having such a hard time coalescing it and getting Democratic votes on this issue, is because so many Democrats and so many of us in the labor movement have been burned so many times on these agreements in the past that we finally said enough is enough. Okay, and that is why we are so active. There's winners and losers in these agreements. The problem is most of the winners are in Greenwich and Darien and New Canaan and North Stamford, who win anyway, okay? And we are here, the frustration for us is to hear how much political pressure Congressman Himes is under from the White House, that President Obama is staking his presidency and working harder on this issue than he has on any other issue up on Capitol Hill since health care. He's got a war room on this issue. What we would love, quite frankly, as a member of the Carpenters Union, is for him to put a war room together on infrastructure. Rosa DeLauro for 20 years has been putting an infrastructure bank proposal together to create jobs here in America, to help use some of the available capital that's out there in corporations that can be used to create jobs right here in America. Instead, we have done nothing on that, and that is a bipartisan mark of shame. That easily could have been included in the stimulus bill, back in 2008. There are Republicans that support the idea as well as Democrats. So we want a war room on that, okay? Infrastructure is an issue that affects everybody across the board here in the 4th District and in Connecticut. It is the reason, Governor Malloy, to his credit, has made it a huge priority, and it is a jobs generator for Americans. There's no question. There aren't any losers. It's a win-win issue. It is an issue supported not only by the AFL-CIO and all the building trades, but it's also an issue supported by the Chamber of Commerce. So let's put our effort into issues like that. Let's put our effort, if we're going to put all our political capital on the line, let's put our issue on immigration reform, an issue that would help bring workers into the system and contributing and help, paying Social Security. Congressman Larson, who I was with yesterday, has a great proposal on addressing Social Security and helping. There was a retirement crisis, in this country. Let's put our capital and effort on that and not on trade, where there's winners and losers. And unfortunately, we feel like we're going to be the losers again on this issue. So, that's where we're at right now. Senator Warren has done a great job putting together this study on the compliance issue. All the Connecticut congressional delegation is opposed to the fast track. Rosa DeLauro has been a phenomenal champion on this issue for us. And, we hope that at the end of the day, Congressman Himes, who has done honestly a great job in terms of methodically trying to take opinions from both sides of this, comes down where Senator Schumer did and where all the congressional delegation has come down, and most of the Democrats, that in the end, let's put our capital and our political capital, in efforts like the infrastructure, like immigration, and some of those others that'll create jobs and help this country and help the entire district and not just portions of it. Thank you so much.
The Presbyterian Church has long been a proponent of fair trade as opposed to free trade. We don't believe that trade is a bad thing. We think it's a good thing as long as it is used and implemented in a way that is fair to everyone. And we oppose the Trans-Pacific Partnership because we've seen the devastating effects that these trade agreements have on real people in their communities around the world. We have mission partners all over the world. Just to give a few examples, in India, farmers are fighting against Monsanto and other multinational corporations who are trying to push GMO seeds on them. And over 200 farmers have committed suicide in the last couple years because they've been forced into crippling debt or lost their farms over the debt cycle that they are put into because of the GMO seeds. They're forced to purchase the seeds from Monsanto, they're forced to purchase the chemicals to treat them, and they cannot reuse their seeds, which they've been doing for generations. In Sri Lanka, corporations, multinational hotel corporations, have been taking over the land of native fishermen. And in order to implement the government's tourism package, and that is displacing enormous numbers of communities. In Peru, a country I'm very familiar with, we have a Peru partnership in our presbytery. In the little town of La Arroya in the Andean Mountains, there is a lead smelting plant owned by a multinational, multi-billionaire from Long Island named Ira Rennert that has been polluting that area for the last 15, 20 years and has refused to make the environmental upgrades that they agreed to. 97% of the children in that community have lead poisoning at levels 10 times what's acceptable by the World Health Organization. These communities are being dealt a raw deal. And what's happening is that the bounties of the earth, our water, our land, our food, are no longer free to all people. They've become commodities to be traded on the open market. And these corporations, we've seen the destruction of entire communities because corporations will come in and want to appropriate the resources for themselves. What happens when these injustices occur is that the church gets called on to pick up the pieces. And we're called upon to give aid, to bring the food and the disaster relief. But what responsibility do we have to prevent these situations from occurring in the first place? Jesus told us that we should care for the least of these. And we do a pretty good job with soup kitchens and thrift stores and what have you, and disaster aid. But Jesus also railed against unjust institutions and structures that create poverty and oppression. Representative Himes, you are a Presbyterian, and I call on you as a fellow member of the Presbyterian faith community to vote against Fast Track, to vote for the people. Please join us and say no to this devastating trade deal. Thank you.
The climate movement opposes the Trans-Pacific Partnership because it would allow multinational fossil fuel companies to sue any of the member countries that take action to stop climate change. Here's why this is so bad for climate change. Scientists have told us that we need to act now and leave 90% of US and Australian coal underground if we want to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Science says we need to stop burning coal now and keep carbon in the ground. TPP would allow big oil to sue governments in order to extract more fossil fuels. If climate action hurts their bottom line, the TPP would allow big oil to sue and force us to pay for their pollution. When our movement finally pushes DC to act and sign a law that puts the Powder River Basin coal deposit in Wyoming and Montana off limits, TPP would allow Peabody Energy to throw a legal tantrum. they'd get to file massive and expensive lawsuits against the U.S. government, arguing that Congress and the White House are costing them, quote unquote, expected future profits because we're not letting them burn their coal. The bottom line is that TPP gives fossil fuel companies the ability to throw lawsuits at any climate protecting law they don't like and break them. That's a huge financial barrier to climate action, one that stacks the deck even more in big oil's favor, and which could force us to pay for big oil's pollution instead of the other way around. TPP would also eliminate environmental reviews of fracked gas export facilities, essentially approving multi-billion-dollar liquid natural gas ports that would make big oil billions once again and contribute substantially to climate change. That's because 85% of the people writing this deal, 85%, are from lobbying groups for massive corporations. When lawyers for Exxon and Nike are writing the rules, you know the top concerns are certainly not protecting the workers or fighting climate change. Not only is TPP being written by corporate lobbyists, it's being written in secret, and the American people cannot read the bill. In fact, as mentioned earlier, the only way you can read it is if you're a member of Congress and you enter a secure windowless room on Capitol Hill without a phone, any notes, or staff. Despite what the White House said, let's be clear, this isn't just about globalization or free trade. In fact, only 5 of the 29 chapters that are written in this deal are about trade. 5 out of the 29 chapters. The rest are giveaways that amount to nothing less than a massive corporate project of no value to American citizens. Based upon the above information, it is obvious that TPP would be detrimental to climate change. We encourage Congressman Himes to reject TPP and publicly commit to saying no to fast track. Thank you very much.
So once again, we see that TPP is not really about trade. It's basically more about corporate rights and the right for a corporation to make profits. So, this is why we're so strongly opposed to fast-tracking such a treaty. Now, Evan Preston is the state director of ConPIRG, and he couldn't be here today, but ConPIRG is joining our coalition to stop fast track, and he's given me a statement to read. His statement reads as follows: ConPIRG remains concerned that negotiations on trade agreements, which can affect everything from the safety of imported fish to health warnings on cigarette packages, from auto safety rules to the soundness of our banking system, are still being conducted in secret, with only a small group of advisors having access to negotiating texts. We believe that draft trade agreements, like bills in Congress, should be fully available to the general public. So like the rest of the members of our coalition, ConPIRG is calling on Congressman Himes to stand up for the constituents in his district and vote no on fast track.
Activate Connecticut is a nonpartisan grassroots initiative focused on encouraging people from diverse backgrounds and political views to speak up and act on behalf of the social and political issues most important to them. Few current issues have raised the degree of dismay among Connecticut citizens as have fast track and the TPP. We are extremely concerned that by giving the okay to fast track, Congress is willingly abdicating their responsibilities in the formulation of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The TPP is being described by its supporters as a trade agreement, but in reality, it goes far beyond trade and has the potential to negatively impact American jobs, finances, food safety, environmental standards, workers' rights, health care, and so much more. It is imperative that our congressional leaders lead. Among the items addressed in the TPP is country of origin labeling as it relates to our food. Under the agreement, country of origin information will not be available, and consumers will have no way of knowing if their fish, meat, chicken, or crops come from well-regulated sources that are committed to high standards of health, sustainability, and workers' protections, or if they are arriving on our store shelves from countries that pay little attention to these concerns. Having campaigned here in Connecticut for the country's first GMO labeling bill, I'm appalled to think that the basic information about the source of my family's food will no longer be available. I will have no assurance that the food I buy is actually the food I want to eat. To date, congressional leaders have had limited access to the text of the TPP, as you have heard, unlike representatives of over 600 corporations who not only have access to the text, but who actually contribute to it. Under the current fast-track bill, the text would not be made publicly available until 30 days after being initialed, and no changes would be allowed at that time. At that point, it would be too late for the public or Congress to have any input. Citizen distrust results from a lack of transparency, and the current secrecy surrounding the TPP certainly qualifies in that regard. The current fast-track bill requires votes in both chambers 60 days after the TPP is made public. No changes can be made during that time, and debate about whether or not Congress's negotiating objectives were met will be limited to 20 hours. We find it impossible to imagine Congress being able to make an informed, cogent, and responsible decision in so short a time on an agreement that has been years in the making. Expecting them to do so is folly. Congress's mere consideration of approving this process is nothing less than a betrayal of their constitutional obligations. A positive future for our nation depends on Congress representing the best interests of the American public before an agreement is reached, rather than merely voting yes or no on an agreement written by and for the interests not of American citizens, but rather the financial interests of international corporations. The fast-track bill as it stands would rob Representative Himes of his ability to ensure that the TPP benefits his constituents, Connecticut, and the country. Activate Connecticut strongly urges Representative Himes to stand with the rest of the Connecticut congressional delegation in publicly committing to vote no on fast-track. And going off of this prepared statement, I would ask you to do two things when you leave this rally. One, if you are a constituent, please, over the next week or so, visit Representative Himes in person if you can, make a call to his office if you can't, and let him know how you feel. And secondly, again, after you leave this rally, please spread the word about this. It's wonderful when we share our message with like-minded folks, but there's strength in numbers. Please help us get those numbers up so that our impact is even stronger. Thank you.
So I think hopefully everybody has seen that the TPP is really not something that we want to fast track. It's something that needs a great deal of scrutiny. We elect our congressmen to represent us, to not represent an ideology about free trade, which may or may not be good for the citizens of the nation and the citizens of Connecticut. So I just want to thank all of our speakers who've expressed their opposition to fast track in a very eloquent way. I also want to thank some other groups that have sponsored this event. Some of them couldn't be here today. The Teamsters, Connecticut Citizens Action Group has joined our alliance. CONFACT, which is Connecticut Families Against Chemical Trespass. The Working Families Party has supported us by doing outreach for this event, and as well as MoveOn.org. The thing that's going to move Jim is hearing from his constituents. So I hope you won't just go home and say, well, that was interesting. You need to take action. So we're trying to empower you with information today, but we're counting on you to follow through and call your representative and let him know how you feel. So please reach out to Congressman Himes, and thanks for coming out. Please enjoy the rest of this glorious day.
Standing on the corner, please employ me. Any job will do. Do you have one for me? For the factory orders died, and retail took a dive, and our little town is dried. How will we survive? Can we turn back time before we globalize? Everybody wants the latest, flatter screen and mega working in the sweatshop, China story, factory for the world, make a nice thing for me, make them cheaper every day. And the other countries say, if you pay a living wage, we will take your trade. Can we turn back time before we globalize? Everybody wants the latest, flatter screen and mega size. We don't want to pay to make them. Yes, we better globalize, 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 globalize. For there's only one mantra for us to echo, only one mantra that we must chant. Free trade is the answer, hear them all bellow. Discredited sellers just won't recant. But there's only one mantra for us to echo, only one mantra that we must chant. Free trade is the answer, hear them all bellow. Discredited sellers just won't recant. Can we turn back time before we globalize? Corporate masters outsource, padding their numbers, darlings of the street, while the heartland crumbles and they're paying dividends, and the rally never ends, and everyone pretends these are healthy trends. Can we turn back time before we globalize? Everybody wants the latest, flatter screen and mega size. We don't want to pay to make them. Yes, we better globalize, 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 globalize. Everybody wants the latest, flatter screen and mega size. We don't want to pay to make them. Yes, we better globalize, globalize, globalize.